Hi guys, welcome back to the Big Sew Along. I'm Ginny, and as always, I thank you very much for choosing to spend some time with me. This week, I am talking about the new Sew House 7 Revel topper. And I think when I talked about this before, I talked about this last week, and I think I called it the Nevin topper. No idea where I got that name. It's actually the Revel topper. This just came out in the last, I'm going to say the last month. I very often get super stoked about a new pattern and buy it right away, but usually I then forget about it for about 6 years and then I make it. This time I really loved the way this top looked, and I felt like it was something that I would just wear a lot, especially as here in the middle of the United States, in all of the United States, we're heading into spring and summer, and I felt like this is a top that I could wear with just a ton of things. Now, me being me, I'm not always happy to just like do things as they are, so I do have a little bit a super simple hack for you on this one too. But let me just tell you first of all, the first one I made View A, which is it's got like a cap sleeve, a grown on cap sleeve, and then it has a facing for the sleeve hems. Now there are a couple of things about this. This has a deep V front like this that is slit down into the fabric, so there's no front seam. Now these sort of slit fronts like this have always been a little bit of a frustration for me. I've always found them sort of difficult to get just right, but remarkably, on the very first try, I actually read the directions and I followed them exactly. And I feel like that was probably the best, that was probably the most successful one of these kind of pointed V tops I have ever made. So going forward, this is exactly how I will do these kind of tops if I come across them again. This first one, which I'll show you a couple pictures here, this one is in a cotton voile that I got from Latif Fabrics several years ago. I made this up in this particular fabric just because I didn't, although I love this fabric, I didn't have very much of it and I didn't have plans for it, and I figured if this top didn't work out, I wasn't going to cry about it. As it turns out, I quite like this top. There are a couple things I might have done differently, but that's due to the fabric and not the pattern. Because this is a voile, you can see some of the backside of my print on some of the seams. Not much you can do about that on something this lightweight. I instead of interfacing the facing, I used 2 layers of plain off-white cotton voile, hoping that that would make it more opaque and make the dots show through less on the collar. That I don't know. I mean, it's fine. The other thing I did is did I say I made a size 12? I made a straight size 12. I made no alterations. View A and View B are the ones with the narrower sleeve, and those both have French darts in them, which look very nice. They also, in the instructions, they tell you to fold under the edges of that facing and sew it down, so it's like instead of a serged edge, you have a folded edge there. I chose not to do that, again, because I didn't want it to show through on the front side of this fabric, but also I feel like that's actually a little bit bulky, and so I generally prefer not to do that. And especially in this case, because like I said, I didn't want any more of that to show than absolutely necessary. The other thing is, you're directed to make a French seam. This seam across the top that starts over here at the sleeve and goes across here, under the collar back here, and all the way down to this side. You are instructed to do that as a French seam. I chose not to do that, although in retrospect, I understand why they tell you to do that, but let me give you my thoughts here. I don't especially like making French seams unless they're essential, mostly because it's 2 seams, so the fabric is folded over on itself. It's just bulkier. I prefer not to have that extra bulk unless it's absolutely necessary. If it's a really thin, fine fabric, if it's organza or chiffon, I'm 100%, or even like maybe a silk crepe de chine, 100% I would do French seams. But in most other things, I just prefer not to do that. So I chose not to do that in this shirt. However, that seam across the top there is a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, I'll show you what it looks like here. It's really difficult to go around the points at the top, at the back of the neck, where you attach the collar to the back of the shirt. It's hard to get that in with a 5/8 inch seam allowance without getting a lot of bunching in those corners. So I did it. I had to undo those corners once and do them both corners, of course, and redo them. And the second time around, I got it. But I will say, if you choose to not do the French seam, I would definitely cut that seam allowance down. The seam allowance that goes across here, just that one, I would cut down to 3/8 of an inch, which is what I did for the second one, which is what I am wearing today. This one, I did view C. I didn't make any alterations to this pattern. Again, I cut a straight size 12. I'll show you some pictures here. I did the exact same application for the facing and the back collar, or this back seam. I serged the edges of my facing, and on the back seam here, I cut that down to 3/8 of an inch before I sewed it together. That was much easier. I had no problems whatsoever getting that together. I had no puckering, no buckling, no craziness at all. The other thing I did on this one, let me just say that the reason I really wanted to make this was just after this pattern came out, I got an email from Bitte Kai Rand, which is a store, I believe, that's in Germany. I'm not 100% sure, but I use them for inspiration a lot, and I will leave a link to them below. But I got an email from them that was featuring this dress right here, and I thought, even though the neckline is different, theirs is just a straight V, and this one obviously has a collar, I personally prefer this one. I think it's nicer looking. But when I saw that pattern, that picture, I knew that I really wanted to make something like that. And then when the Revel topper came out, I thought that could really work. So that's what I did. The only change I made to this pattern at all was to add length. I did not add any extra width. The size 12 fits me just fine, even in the longer length. If you are hippier, you may need to like give yourself a little extra width at the bottom or at the hips there, but for me it was fine just cutting it straight, adding straight evenly across, all the way across the bottom. And I made this in a rayon challis that I got from Haber & Fabric's sale bin like a couple of years ago. So again, although I do love this fabric and I really love the way this came out, this was not expensive fabric and I didn't have plans for it. So again, I wasn't going to be too bummed out if it didn't work out. However, I feel like this one did really work out and I really love it. I don't go to fancy occasions very often, but I do have an event coming up at the museum where my husband works at the end of April, and I'm hoping to wear this dress to it because I absolutely love it. I think I will make it as a dress again. To be honest with you, I actually think I prefer it this length. I would also make it as a tunic dress thing, so not quite as long as this one, but maybe just below my knees, so just a little bit shorter than the one I have on today. All I did for the length was I just matched it up from shoulder to hem. I measured another dress that I quite like the length of, and I just added length to make sure that this was that same length. And I gave it like an 1.5 inch hem, a good heavy 1.5 inch hem, so it drapes nicely at the bottom. I do have a third one of these cut out because the first one, although like I said before, I think it's really cute and I like it. It's limited wear wise just because of the colorway. So I do have a couple of pieces of linen in my stash, and I cut one of these out in view B, which is very similar to view A, but it just has a banded cuff at the bottom of the sleeve. I cut that out in a white linen, and I feel like I'm just gonna get a ton of wear out of this one. All right, you guys, I think there are probably, this pattern, like I said, just came out and I haven't looked, but I'm sure there are probably reviews of this pattern from other people. If you want to Google that and see what other people have to say, I probably will do that as soon as I'm done recording this video. That is it for me this week. I am off to Vermont to see my dad for a couple of days, and then I will be back next week. Catherine from So Much Sewing and Catherine reached out to me a week or two ago and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a collaboration with her. And I, of course, am very excited to do a collaboration with her. So we are working on that, and I will tell you all about it next week. Until then, I wish you all happy sewing.